off Game 3 of the NBA Finals featuring the Celtics and Warriors. It's coming to the Garden. Should be a good time, obviously. Nick Whalen, RotoWire, Nick Friar, DraftKings contributor, both joining us here. Welcome in, boys. It's good to see you, obviously. And hey, it's a best of 5 at this point, so technically the Celtics have taken over home court advantage, which is a good thing. Tied at 1, Boston, the C's, now minus 115 favorites to take home the title. Do you agree with these odds, Nick? We start with you.
Which Nick?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
know what? You know what? Take your pick. I guess that's right. It's a strictly last name segment. Friar, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Friar,
so look, I like it at 115, minus 115 right now, but at the same time, I do think that the Celtics are going to lose home court advantage in Boston. I think it's going to go 1-1 again here. So I think if you want to move on it now at 115, sure, I do think the Celtics are going to win this series, the NBA Finals. I've been saying in 7 for them since the jump. But at the same time, I think you can also wait a little bit, wait until we get past Game 4. You might be able to get them at underdogs, even though it might be slight underdogs.
How you feel about that, Whalen?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to see a back and forth series that, the odds are probably going to, kind of reverse seemingly game to game based on the results. It's interesting, though. The series is 1-1. A lot of people are expecting it to go 6 or 7. And yes, you could technically say, Boston did kind of steal home court by taking Game 1 in Golden State. But, Golden State has the potential Game 7 on its home court, and yet Boston is still favored. And I think that says a lot about what the odds makers think of the Boston Celtics. I think we saw 2 really uniquely competitive games. I think in Games 1 and 2 that, the final score looked a little more lopsided, certainly, than most of the game was. And I think Boston bounces back in Game 3 at home. I think the Celtics actually played pretty well through the first half. Obviously got blitzed a little bit during that third quarter. Kind of a reversal of what we saw in Game 1, where it felt like Golden State controlled most of the game and then got blitzed in the fourth. But that's been the story really of the playoffs, especially for Boston, where it feels like 75% of the game goes one way, 25% of the game completely throws off the outcome.
Whalen, if you still had the mustache, it'd be a lot easier to tell you guys apart. But hey, you just teased it, so let's stick with it. The Celtics plus 135, or actually just plus 135 in general, on this series either going 6 or 7 games. So you believe it's going to be a long series. I think it's going to be a long series. What do you think? How does this play out?
Well, the mustache is a touchy subject right now, so thank you for pointing that out. I have a wedding coming up this week. I was convinced by multiple parties that it wasn't professional. So
don't listen to those people. You can always consult with me.
Yeah, thank you. I need to get like a green screen mustache or something just for these hits. But yeah, I mean, it's not the most appealing number. If you're looking to bet that right now, I think I would maybe go on the DraftKings Sportsbook, and if you navigate over to the finals markets, there's like a million bets out there. But you could bet on the series correct score. So if you think the Celtics are going to win in 6, you can get that at plus 260. If you think the Celtics are going to win in 7, you can get that, at 5-1. And conversely, if you think Golden State's going to win in 7, you got that at plus 270. Like, you're getting better odds, I think, on those specific results. And obviously, you're narrowing, your path of outcome. But that's where I'm looking right now. And at this point, I don't think there's really any evidence to support that this is not going to go 6 or 7.
Friar, we're a best of 5 right now. You expect at least 4 more?
Yeah, I thought the Celtics were going to win this one in 7 from the jump, so I think Whalen makes a great point about 5-1 taking the Celtics there. But I still like when you say a team is going to win in 7 games, of course that means that you think the other team could possibly sneak it out and end up winning it all. So I think getting the series to go 7 games at plus 135, I still like that still. So I think that as much as you're not getting a ton of value, like Whalen was highlighting with some of the correct series score, correct series outcome, I still think this is a decent one to take at 7 games, because I don't think this goes 6. Like, the NBA sometimes gets involved a little bit, whether or not it's obvious or not is another question. But I think they'll make sure this goes to 7, if nothing else.
What are you saying about Zach Zarba?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Look, finals MVP in the East, okay? East Finals MVP last round, it was very clearly going to be either Jason Tatum or Jimmy Butler. This case, it feels like Steph Curry or Jason Tatum, depending obviously on the winner of the series. You look at the odds right there. Curry is even money plus 100, Tatum plus 115 right behind him. Bearded Nick, is there a long shot you like for MVP?
Yeah, I mean, if we're trying to break it down and figure out who's one of those long guys to get it, I'm looking at either Derek White or Marcus Smart. Derek White, of course, the significantly longer shot. But when you look at those two guys, those are guys who, if they're gonna slow down Steph Curry in this series, it's gonna be those two guys that you're gonna be focusing on quite a bit. at least the voters are going to be focusing on too, because that's the other thing we got to keep in mind too. It's not just about player performance. We also got to consider what are the voters, like what do they value in terms of narrative and things like that. So with White, I think if you're looking for a crazy long shot, okay, go for it. But I think Marcus Smart is the better bet of the two, because the theatrics with this guy and how he's able to bounce back and everything like that, he has a lot going for him. And I know he just had a rough game. That's where it's like, White has been consistent the first two games offensively. Smart is going to have this. I'm expecting to have a bounce back game in game 3. So there's a little bit, you can go either way with these two guys. Smart is definitely the preferred option for me, but those are the two long ones right now.
Whalen, tell me why the answer is Al Horford.
Well, Al Horford, I believe, was 90-1 to win Finals MVP going into Game 1. So I would feel a little dirty, taking him at 10-1 now on the DK Sportsbook if you weren't able to grab him at 90. But I think Nick's on the right track that it has to be somebody with the Celtics. Through 2 games, I am extremely convinced that if the Warriors win the series, it's going to be Steph Curry for a number of reasons. One, he's been more aggressive than we've seen from him in the past on these stage. He's been their best player, clearly. Like, there's really no one else who holds a candle to him through 2 games. And 2, he has the narrative that he hasn't won one yet. I think that's going to work in his favor. Kind of a lifetime achievement, Finals MVP, if you will. That will also likely be deserved. It's not like Klay Thompson has lit the world on fire. Draymond was awful in Game 1. Like, there's just really no one else for Golden State. With Boston, it's interesting that Tatum is still, such a heavy favorite, because I thought he was outright awful in Game 1. They still win despite that. He was okay in Game 2, but he's still plus 125. His odds have really not shifted all that much. So there's kind of this belief that if Boston wins the series, it's going to be Jason Tatum. If I had to bet on a long shot, I guess it would be Horford at 10-1, just because there's still that memory of what he did in Game 1. I thought he was their best overall player in Game 1, completely disappeared in Game 2. But let's say they come back and win Game 3 tomorrow night. Al Horford goes for 20 and 15. All of a sudden, that's kind of fresh in the mind again. Like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, those guys need to be a little more consistent. With Horford, all you're looking for maybe is like 2 or 3 standout games. And, maybe he goes off in a Game 7. And if Jason Tatum has had just a good, not great series, potentially there's some kind of recency bias in that result if Horford finishes off the series with a big game. So he's the guy, I guess, I could imagine doing that the most. But it really feels like it's going to be Tatum or Curry.
A lot of sort of, talk about the series overall that we've been doing here, guys. Why don't we actually talk about Game 3, though? Again, that's in Boston tomorrow night. And with the Celtics at plus 3.5 favorites, Whalen, going into this game, I would also be remiss and ignoring my Celtics bias if I didn't also tell you the Celtics are 6-0 this postseason, coming off a loss. What are the expectations? How do you like that number?
Thank you for acknowledging the Celtics bias.
Of course.
I see the tweets. They're often informative, but often one-sided.
Very.
It does feel like this series is just going to be like whatever team's at home is going to be favored by somewhere between 2.5 and 4 points. And the home court is kind of going to swing it. It feels to me like Boston, maybe kind of after they stole Game 1, I would certainly, they were not okay losing Game 2, but I think they kind of realized what their fate was going to be in the third quarter and said, all right, let's not overextend ourselves. Let's get back home and let's win at least one, if not both, of these next 2 games. So I think they're confident. I don't think they're shaken at all by what happened in that third quarter against Golden State. And I expect a more focused effort from the Boston Celtics. I think even early in Game 2, I thought Boston was going to come out and maybe control most of Game 2. The way that they played early on, Jaylen Brown was like 4 for 4, I think, to open the game. And then that kind of wore off. I think at home, that you can kind of extend that level of play a little bit longer. Crowd is going to be completely juiced up for this one. So I like Boston. I think to jump back out and take back control of the series, I think we're 2-1 heading into Game 4 on Friday night.
Yeah, Nick, I think Brown went like 2 of 14 the rest of the way after that hot start.
It looked like he was going to go for 50.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous, and then totally calmed down, obviously. Friar, we know, especially with like a week and a half between games, there's no momentum between these things. So how do you like the number at 3.5 here for this game?
Yeah, look, I know we talk a lot about stats when we're trying to break things down and everything, but when we get to the postseason, there are some intangibles that I do kind of take into account, which is why I like the Celtics again to cover as home favorites on Wednesday. The thing is, Jason Tatum has been such a steady voice throughout the entire postseason, as much as you have Ime Udoka, who's been that way throughout the entirety since the regular season. Tatum does not get phased when he has these down games. He does not get phased when his team loses. At least he doesn't seem to admit that at all. And they've shown with their results, like you said, Adam, 6-0 after losses in the postseason. At some point, you would think that would go away, but at the same time, this is a team that's making a title run right now, so they could easily continue to run that. I think they will because you have that consistent voice both within Tatum and Udoka, and then defensively and offensively, they're such a remarkably versatile team. You can have anybody contributing offensively on a given night, and of course defensively, they are well equipped to cover this Warriors team, which is why they've gotten to this point.
Nick, it's not just the DK Sportsbook either. Obviously, we have the DFS side of things, and naturally, with the captain option or whatever, however you want to fill out your utility for a lot of contests in the DraftKings lobby. If you are fixated on Game 3, who's the difference maker in this one? Whalen, start us.
Yeah, I mean, if we're excluding Curry and Tatum, who we, of course, expect to play well, even in their bad games, there's still going to be decent DFS options. And honestly, Jaylen Brown, it's kind of reached that level over these last couple series. I'm kind of looking in that upper mid-range. Is it going to be Al Horford? Is it going to be Klay Thompson? Even Andrew Wiggins, who I thought was really good, kind of as this like energy guy in Game 2. Right? I think he only had 6 rebounds, but it felt like he had like 15 rebounds, the way he was flying around, kind of always at the rim. I like Klay Thompson to bounce back at some point. I listened to a ton of NBA podcasts, and there's a lot of people that are really down on Klay Thompson. And I know he was terrible in Game 2. I think he was 1 of 8 from 3. But on the whole, I mean, for these playoffs coming into the series, he was 20 points per game, 46% from the field, 40% from 3 on almost 10 attempts per game. I mean, that to me, that sounds a lot like old Klay Thompson. And I think he's going to wake up at some point in the series. He's not going to have another game where he's 1 for 8. All those looks were pretty good looks. Those are going to continue to be there. As great as the Celtics are at running teams off the 3-point line, it's Golden State. They're still going to generate looks. They're such a tough team to guard. So I can't guarantee that it comes in Game 3, but one of these next few games, we're going to get a Klay Thompson game where he's like 6 of 9 from 3 midway through the third quarter. So if we're talking DFS, you're trying to gun for first place in one of those showdown contests. Klay's a guy that I'm going to roll with tomorrow night.
Friar, you want to offer a Celtic, or you like one of those 3-time champs also?
Yeah, I know I've been pretty Celtic heavy today, but honestly, I just feel that good about them going into this game, and that's why Marcus Smart is the guy who I wanted to highlight. He's 11.7K at his captain's price, 7.8K on the utility, and he missed a couple of the games that the Celtics played following their losses in the postseason. But in the 4 games that he has played after a Celtics loss, he scored at least 18 points each time out and logged either 7+ assists or 7 rebounds every single time. So this is a guy if you're trying to put a mid-range guy at that captain spot, I think he's your best option too, because he's immensely versatile, and he knows how to help this team respond every single time. So for me, Smart's my guy. I know Horford, Nick's talked about him a little bit. I do think he's a worthwhile play as well, but I think Smart, when he comes to these kind of bigger moments where there's kind of a little bit of a buildup and everything, he ends up stepping up.